Okay, this little video is talking about on 6.2 how to approach 9, 10, and 11. And the first one, 9, is about how is the sine function changing as the angle goes, think about it going around the circle, specifically the unit circle. Doesn't matter what the radius is, it's going to be the same regardless because trig functions are ratios. But if unit circle, I think, is the easiest to think about because really then you just have to look at the x and y coordinates since r is 1. And so if we look at sine, remember it's helpful to remember that sine of an angle equals y over r. And so let's see what and again, because r is 1, in this particular case, we're going to use the unit circle as our reference. The sine is just looking at the y coordinate. So how is the ratio changing as we go from 0 to 90 degrees or 0 to pi over 2? Well, looking at the unit circle here, at 0, the y coordinate is 0. And so again, we're looking at theta versus, and how the interval theta how that results in the ratio sine theta. So when we go, looking at 0 to 90 degrees, or I'm going to write pi over 2, which is the same as 90, and 0 radians, sine starts at 0, because that's what the y coordinate is at 0, and then goes up to 1. So it's increasing from 0 to 1. And why I'm asking you this is to get a sense of what is happening, because this is going to, the ratios, because this is going to affect our graphs when we get into graphing, which I can't believe we're going to potentially be doing remotely, but we'll do our best. Okay. And so then, again, continuing looking at the y coordinate from 90 degrees or pi over 2 to pi. So at pi over 2, notice the y coordinates is 1. And then when we get to 180 or pi, it goes down to 0. So it's decreasing from 1 to 0. Okay. And now let's go from pi, or 180, to 3 pi over 2, which is 270. So from pi to 3 pi over 2. It's at, remember at pi, the y-coordinate was 0. And it's going from 0 to, and eventually going to be -1. So it's still decreasing. It's decreasing from 0 to -1. And the last bit, of this one revolution would be going from 3 pi over 2, which is 270, to 2 pi, which is 360. It's the y-coordinate as 270 is -1, and it's going to end up at 0. So it's increasing from -1 and then ending up at 0. Now for cosine, it's going to be a totally similar process here. Tangent, we'll have to think about a little bit more, but let's make some room here. Try to move it to the side. Okay, perfect. Let's do cosine. Okay, so if we think about, again, how the angle's moving, starting from 0, going all the way to 360 or 2 pi, and let's think what's happening to the ratio. And again, because we're in the unit circle, we're thinking of r as 1, so we're really just looking at x over r, but since r is 1, we're just looking at the x coordinate here. So if we talk about going from 0 to pi over 2, well, the x coordinate starts at 1 and then goes to 0. So it will be decreasing from 1 to 0. So starting at a high point of 1 and going down to 0. And then when we talk about going from 90 or pi over 2 to pi, it is going from, again, the x coordinates going from 0 to -1. So it's continuing to decrease from. And then if we look at what's happening to the x coordinate from pi to 3 pi over 2, or in other words, from 180 to 270. It's going from -1 to 0, so it's actually now going up. So increasing from -1 to 0. And finally, we'll look at when it's going from 3 pi over 2, which is 270, to 2 pi, or 180. It's going to increase further from 0 to 1. Okay, so that is cosine, and the last one is going to be tangent. So let's kind of do a blank screen for that. Okay, so for tangent, let's again make some room. I'm going to create our unit circle again here. So we've got the coordinates 1, 0, 0, 1, -1, 0, and 0, -1. Okay, so the difference here is the fact that r is 1 isn't super helpful for us because tangent of an angle, in this case, doesn't involve r, so it's equal to y over x. Okay, so let's look at, as we go from 0 here, so from 0 to pi over 2, let's again draw how theta is changing versus how tangent of theta is changing. So from 0 to pi over 2, we're starting off with tangent being 0 over 1, which is 0. So it's going from 0 to, well, 1 over 0, which is undefined, but from what we've learned before, as we get, what's going to really happen there, as we get closer and closer to the y coordinate getting huge, but the x, in comparison to the x coordinate, so the y coordinate's getting bigger and bigger, and the x coordinate's getting smaller and smaller, this is going to go towards positive infinity. So it is definitely increasing from 0 to pi over 2. Well, when we're at pi over 2, we just said where it exploded, it was up at positive infinity. Well, what happens as we go from there to pi? Well, when we go to there to pi, well, at pi, where the y over x is 0 over -1, so it is going to be going from, actually, let's hold on. I want to think about something. Actually, let's hold that thought for a second, because actually something different is happening when it's going from pi over 2 to pi. So just on the other side of pi over 2, notice now that the x-coordinate has become negative. Y is still positive, so we've got this on the other side of pi over 2, just slightly more than 90 degrees. The y value is still, and if we're talking about the unit circle, it's pretty close to 1. And the x-coordinate is tiny, but it is tiny negative. So instead of starting at infinity, just to the on the other side of 90, so a little bit bigger, 90 will be going from negative infinity to, and then at pi, it will be 0 over -1, which is 0. So again, it will be going from negative infinity to 0, which is interesting to think about. So it's actually going to be increasing there. And then if we go, if we then look at pi to 3 pi over 2. All right, this is 3 pi over 2 here. We just said at pi, we were at 0. 0 over -1. And then when we get to 3 pi over 2, both x and y are negative, and it's going to be the same situation as before, because we've got the y coordinate's -1, but the x coordinate is getting really, really close to 0 from a negative place, so from the negative side. So this will be exploding to positive infinity. So again, increasing. And the last and the last interval will be 3 pi over 2 to 2 pi. Well, now that we move over to just more than 270, just more than 3 pi over 2, now, both coordinates are no longer negative. Y is negative, but x has become positive. So we're going to be starting out at negative infinity, and then we'll be heading towards 360 or 2 pi, which is going to be 0 over 1 or 0. So notice in all of these cases, we have an increasing look happening. And in fact, the tangent function, when we graph it, will, when we look left to right, be increasing. And all these places, like from what we've learned from our rational functions unit, if the graph is going towards positive or negative infinity on either side of some x value, then that x value is a vertical asymptote. And so that is exactly what's happening at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. So when we graph tangent, we're going to have vertical asymptotes there. That's where tangent's going to be undefined. Okay, hope that was helpful.